Check, check. Good? I think I will wait a couple minutes because here's everybody showing up. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I see that it's basically everybody, faces I know here. So I was just at FOSDEM last week and was basically planning to do the same talk at both places, but I realized after that talk that I had targeted it entirely wrong because I did a high-level overview of Fedora, and everybody in the room was Fedora people already, and everybody knew everything I was talking about, so it went very smoothly, and then everybody was like, yup, at the end, and people didn't, I don't think, get very much out of it. So I'm going to try and mostly talk about new things here, and hopefully that will be useful. How many people here are Fedora users or contributors? Yeah, see everybody again. Okay, who's not? All right, okay. So if you are not a Fedora user or contributor and don't know what's going on, we can bring you up to speed here. I think there's nothing that's going to be really shocking here either. Here's beautiful artwork. And then we start out with this. The state of Fedora is awesome. We are doing really well. This release is very well received. So I wanted to start off by sharing some press clips here. So we got very, very good reviews for Fedora this time around. And even the Register, who's notoriously grumpy about everything, they have some complaints, late, some complaining about the installer, but a very positive review overall. So some lovely quotes. And then also, not just about the release, but a lot of the reviewers sort of noted that there's kind of they felt a renewed sense of purpose in the distribution, and that we're kind of going in a good direction overall. So that's always very, very heartening to see. And then particularly, this Ars Technica review was just great, and I really was happy to see that they kind of got what we're doing and what we're working on these days. So I really was happy for both of these quotes here, because it really felt like our message is getting out there and people are listening. So this is the Everything is Awesome section, and I guess since a lot of Fedora contributors, thank you very much for all of your awesome work on this release, and everybody should be very proud. So, next I am going to show some statistics, and Stephen Smoogen put these together, and so these are drawn from various logs and so on, and he wanted me to very carefully caution you that there are all sorts of flaws in our methodology, and so we are kind of piecing these together as a guesswork project. So there are smoke and mirrors and probably velociraptors lurking behind the doors here. So we don't want to draw too much from the precise numbers, but I think there's some overall interesting things to see. Okay, so this slide I showed at FOSDEM, and this is basically, yeah, it's an overwhelming graph here, but this is, the purple one on the left is Fedora Core 6. And so this is every release since then, from the logs to the connections to the mirror server. So this is the mirror manager. When a system goes to look for updates, it hits the mirror manager. And so this is IP connections per day from a single IP address. So one system is counted only once per day. So some of the smoke and mirrors there is particularly that NAT is very popular now, and especially, this is something that's changed over the past 10 years. It used to be the case that people would have NAT on their home network, and that was pretty much where you'd see it. But now you see, company networks are everything's all coming from one IP address, and even if you have a home internet broadband connection, you may be behind NAT and look like you're all coming from one address to the outside world. So all those connections are all counted as one. Whereas on the other side, people are getting really short DHCP leases, maybe like a 1-hour DHCP lease. So it may be that if they connect multiple times, they're getting overcounted. And we have no way of telling what the actual state of that is. So that's some of the questions there. And then also, many systems might not ever hit the update mirrors, and then we can't count them. And furthermore, this is almost exclusively North America and Europe. And we know there are Fedora users in the rest of the world, but they are not counted by this because they tend to not have always-on internet connections and don't update very frequently, so they don't really show up very well here. So that said, I think there's some interesting things. So that really high spike there is Fedora 8, and we don't really know why. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Let me get there, Kevin. So the Fedora 8 was very high, and it continues to be very popular all throughout. One of the theories is that is the last release for a little while that supported Zen, and so EC2 had Fedora 8 image that was very popular for a long time. But I'm not quite sure because I don't know if those images were checking in for updates, so something else might be going on. But yeah, if you take out 8 there, you can kind of actually see from 7 to 9. If you subtract that as an aberration, there's actually kind of a straight line going up all the way up there to 14. And then we get to what I guess is in the proverbial curse sense, interesting times in Fedora, where the uptake of 15 was very, very low and never surpassed 14 at all. But one of the things that, there's another version of this graph where they're stacked. One of the things that's nice to note there is that we didn't actually lose users. People just didn't update for a long time. And then we can see here at the end of the chart, Fedora 20 is back up, maybe not quite to the same pattern, but back up to that same middle line there with numbers. And very, very far to the end, this little blue line is Fedora 21, and you can see we just surpassed Fedora 20 in connection. So it looks like we're on good track with the new release there as well. It's hard to know exactly what happened in the middle thing there. A lot of stuff changed all at once, and interesting times. But it looks like we are sort of back on track from the Yum connection statistics view of things, at least. One of the things I also think is very interesting from this graph is basically what happens every release is kind of a third breakdown of user behavior where when a new release comes out, about a third of users upgrade to that new release within a couple weeks, so very, very quickly. So very active user base there. And then there's kind of a slope over the next 6 months where by the time the N+1 release comes out, another third of users pretty consistently across the chart have upgraded to another release from there. And then the final third is this long tail that goes on forever and ever, and that's pretty much never goes away. I noticed that there's a weird drop for Fedora 14 there, just like 6 months ago. That drops down to almost nothing. I'm not sure what caused that, if it's a data collection weirdness or whatever, but let's say everybody suddenly fled off Fedora 14 and switched to 21. I don't know. That seems unlikely, but maybe it did. Maybe there are people who upgrade every 7 releases and they decided the time is hit. What's that? That's my wife. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This slide is basically the things I just said. Okay, so here is another statistic. This is Fedora 21. So this is ISO downloads, and it's again ISO download requests from the mirror manager server. So it doesn't capture everything, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in this as well, because some of it might just be crawlers hitting the web, and we don't know exactly. But this is the basic breakdown of the ISO downloads. About 70% Fedora Workstation, about 15% server, and I think that this one doesn't count the net install in there. So if we count the net install, I think the net install is over in the other category as well. Then we got about 5% downloads of the cloud images, and that is actually the QCOW and RAW all put together into one. And then about 3% KDE spin, 2% XFCE, and then all the rest, less than 2% of all the various other spins and things. I don't know where ARM fits into this, Peter.
There was a question about that. How did you put in that box? Do we get any statistics from like DigitalOcean and Rackspace where you can deploy a cloud directly?
No, we have. Yeah, so the question was, do we get any statistics from Rackspace, DigitalOcean, Amazon, cloud providers? No, we have very little visibility into what's going on there. And yeah, so that's another question about the cloud thing. Theoretically, you download that ISO once, you put it into Glance in your OpenStack, and then you launch it 1,000,000 times. And so, maybe that the cloud is the most popular overall. Who knows, really, with that? So that's something we don't count very well. And all the cloud providers keep their actual statistics very close. There is, by the way, a site you might see that's like Cloud Marketplace or something, which purports to have a pie chart of who's using what in Amazon EC2, and if you look at that, it is like 99% a different Linux distribution. Be aware that that is just counting the number of AMIs available in EC2 and says nothing about what is running, and that distribution puts their nightly builds into the AMI EC2, and as well as Bitnami appliances being built like nightly as well. So the number of AMIs is overstated, and that's a statistic you can get, but not a very useful one. So this is back to the Yum connections graph, and I think this is another useful thing. I don't know what's going on at the end of this chart. I'll have to ask Smooge about that. But basically, we have here, green line is Fedora connections, and the red line is EPEL. So somewhere around 2012, EPEL became much more popular in terms of connections than Fedora, and it is on a huge growth curve. That's not really surprising, because EPEL is very popular, and CentOS and RHEL are very popular. So that's an interesting part of the project. And we had at FOSDEM a meeting with the CentOS folks about kind of the future of EPEL and collaboration there. And one of the things I would really like to do is to make sure that people who are using EPEL are kind of drawn into the Fedora community, as Fedora, feeling a Fedora affinity and feeling Fedora helps serve their needs, and that they can contribute back through Fedora. So we want to find some ways to make that kind of participation and that path into Fedora easier, because I think that's an important growth path for us, and especially as a way that people can actually feed into the project there. And there are some kind of neat ideas for possible collaboration with CentOS there that I think will be cool. So yeah, here's where I get into a scary suggestion. You've got barcodes on the neck here. I would really like it if we would have a Census system which is opt-out, which provides a unique ID for each system, so that we can actually get some numbers that have that we can really feel good about showing at slides, and not so much smoke and mirrors. So I would like to suggest that we actually use a UUID that's just generated for the purpose of connection tracking for this, not using a machine ID or something that might be used for any other purpose, and just a minimal amount of data, just that UUID, and if you're running a spin or one of the product releases and the version. You could opt out, not in, because if it's opt-in, we're going to get meaningless numbers. It's just going to be like a web survey. But we could actually do things like drop the IP addresses from the log, which basically, in terms of being an actual meaningful identifier, that's actually a lot, and you can correlate that with a lot of interesting things. If we drop that from the logs, it really actually becomes, you can't really anonymize things, but a lot less unique. And you could even, although it might be marginally useful to track, whether users follow Fedora releases over time, overall, that's not so important. So we could regenerate that UUID weekly or something like that if people really are concerned about the privacy implications of having a trackable number, so that you can't really follow anyone around with it, but that we can still know that we're counting uniquely despite DHCP lease or NAT or anything like that. So this is a thing I would like to suggest. It's not a demand, but I'd like to talk about that more or something so we can get more useful numbers. And then possibly opt-in options for feeding us more information, because the more data we have, the better we can serve our user base. That's really all it comes down to. I have this slide that I just like, so I'm going to show that there. It's from a different presentation, but I didn't have the heart to take it out. OK, so that's enough with the numbers. And now talk a little bit about the Fedora Council. This is our new governance body. Is everybody familiar with the Fedora Council that we are moving to from the Fedora board? Anybody not familiar with that? OK, a couple of people. So basically, rather than having a Fedora board that generally is passive and gives pronouncements when there's some sort of problem, we decided to move to a more active board, which tries to be a more meritocratic representation of people in the project. And so these are the people we have on that board. Me, we have a community impact role that is being filled later this month. I'm very excited about that. We have a great person stepping into that role, somebody everybody will be happy with, I think. And then as well as outreach and engineering members. Josh Boyer, Christoph couldn't make it because he has the FOSDEM plague, which I thankfully escaped. And then we also have elected members as well who are all here. And so the model for this committee is actually a consensus-based model. So even though it is not a fully elected board, we feel like it gives the elected members a bigger voice than they possibly had before, because formerly only the Fedora Project Leader had the equivalent of a veto power. And now basically everybody who's on this committee has to be convinced of something, which hopefully we can actually get things moving as well, because the model is to have a sort of a lazy consensus. We don't have to wait for everybody to vote, but if somebody has an objection, we're going to stop and talk about it until we feel like it's a good direction for the project overall. We also have auxiliary members who basically only have that veto when it comes to their area, but still are members of the council and can take place in budget discussions and everything else. That the program manager, and I think Yaroslav is stepping down from that role after the Fedora 21 release, so we'll have a new person coming into that. That's a really important, that's the role where the person does all of the behind-the-scenes scheduling and grunt work and secretarial work that nobody who isn't paid to do it really wants to do, so that's a nice thing to have. And we are also going to have a diversity advisor. I think that's we are not quite all John Malkovich in the Fedora project, but we are fairly bad, as many open source projects are, at diversity. So we really, as we were looking to make this council, wanted to make sure that that was something that we address. And so we are going to be forming a search committee soon to find somebody to be the right person for this position. And it is initially at least going to be a volunteer position, but I am lobbying Red Hat to make it a paid position. If you work for Red Hat and are concerned about this and would like to talk to anybody who's an influencer that would be awesome, because I think this would be an important thing to have. So going back to this, the other really important thing with the Fedora Council is that we are focused on this idea of identifying objectives that will be our 12 to 18-month objectives for the project. And so we have actual, in Fedora, we've often been release-based, so we think about changes for this current release and don't have a very good mechanism for how are we going to do things for a little bit longer than that. Just it'll span multiple releases. How do we coordinate that, and how do we coordinate changes that really go across not just a little bit of technical things, but across the project overall? So the first one of these that we've approved is the 3 products thing that we're already working on. I say additions in the slide here rather than products because Red Hat has nicely asked me not to use the word product in marketing things because there's a very important message about projects versus products that helps the salespeople. I'm not sure if this talk is an engineering talk or a marketing talk, so I wrote additions on the slide, but basically, anyways, Stephen Gallagher is going to be the lead for that in the next couple releases, getting that split worked out and some of the details, both technical and cultural, all solved. But we also have room for some more objectives, and so at this conference, this is the place. In this conference and Flock, we want to talk about what those other objectives are going to be. So there's space for basically 2 to 4 of those in the project we'll be working on at once, and I would like to present some more of these, and we should talk about what our other objectives are going to be. One of the big ones is, part of the Fedora.next idea has been both this 3-product split, but also a model where we split the distribution into more modular rings of policy, where we have sort of the core base set, which has very strict policy and maybe API control, and making sure that we gate things going into that they don't break anything else. Whereas at the outside, a little leaf package, some game you've packaged up. If your packaging of that game is kind of crappy, that might be okay. At least we get the game in the distribution and keep people can play it. But we don't really want to block the whole distribution if you've done something that breaks things in your game over at the fringe. So we need to do that, but it is a lot of work to do so in a way that really goes across all of the distribution. I have actually done separate talks on why that's important. Fedora Atomic is going to be an important part of this. This is something that came from a Collins DevConf talk. Was it last year only? It feels like it was 5 years ago at this point, but with a talk on RPM OS tree, and that really caught on, and Red Hat has really gotten behind it, and I think this is going to be something, it's a kind of a DevConf success story in some ways, and it's also, I think it's going to be fundamental to our future, and it really goes across the project in a lot of ways. So in order to really bring this together, I'm not going to read that whole list, but wow, it's a big impact across the whole project in order to really remake the distribution or make another form of the distribution that's different from what we've done before, and it is something that as computing is changing, the landscape is different, the competitors are different, and what our users need are different, and we're going to need to adapt. So that's a big thing. And so mostly, in order to get something done, I can stand up and talk about how important it is, but we need the people. So if this is something that is important to you, you're working on this internally at Red Hat, you're working on this on your own, let's all get together and make it actually happen in Fedora rather than just me standing up here and talking about it. We need the people. Additionally, so I think that should be one of the other objectives. I'm not quite sure how to frame it in the formal way we have, so I would like some help in putting that together. And then we also have room for a couple more of these things that we want to do, because we've got a lot of people in the project and we can do more than one. Even if we're working on that big thing, there's some other things we can work on. I have heard some ideas, and I have some ideas for some other important things we can work on. But we should talk about those here at this conference and upcoming conferences, and figure out what we're going to do in the future. As I made this slide, I also realized that the Fedora 23 release is basically targeted for the date that they jump to in the future in Fedora. So if we can hit that date, that's basically my goal. The whole schedule is going to be based around making sure we hit that date, no matter what. And so on the Fedora Council in general, this is, I know that's not a very wieldy URL. You'll probably find it easier with Google, but this is the discussion list for Fedora Council, and not as many people are subscribed to this as maybe should be. If you are interested in Fedora project direction and strategy, this is the list we would like to talk about it on. So we talk about these objectives. Is there something big you would like to do in Fedora over the next 18 months? Let's talk about it there and put together a formal proposal, and we can talk about it in the council and figure out what we're going to do there. All right, that was nice 20 minutes. I'm on to there. I'm done. There's no gigantic conclusion. Does anybody have any questions about any of that or anything else at all? Kevin.
So, being downloaded, this is just from environment
Right, that's true. So, yeah, so the question was, the statistics in that pie chart are just from Mirror Manager. If they download directly from a mirror somewhere, we have no way of counting that. That is absolutely true, and is one of the reasons I would like to have the UUID tracking, something that would let us be more representational. And I would really like it so that if, when we check in, it'll say, I use the KDE spin to do that, so we can actually see, what people are doing and how we can, you can look at it and say, I want to grow the KDE spin. This is what has happened over the releases, and see where that goes. I think another thing we want to do, that right now the spins page didn't get much attention this release. So there's a website where you can download the different spins, and that's basically the same as it was. Whereas we redid the main Get Fedora page to be all splashy. I know the web design team. Yeah, so the web design team is going to look at trying to make that more exciting and more useful to the different spins as well, and to the ARM release as well. Any consideration about a flavor for Internet of Things? Peter briefly talked about that at a talk yesterday. I think it's very interesting. If people are interested in putting that together, I think that's a very appealing idea, especially if, again, it's made of people. If people want to do that, that would be cool. And I think that is one of the most likely possibilities for another area to go into. Peter Robinson says, if you're interested, come speak to him. You can yeah. Stephen? Oh, same question. Okay. Dennis? So what about supporting the older OLPC hardware as a... Right. So yeah, at the moment... Right, so the question was basically, at the moment, OLPC is a Fedora remix. Could we bring that more into the product, into the project as a more top-level thing? I don't see why not. Again, if people show up and really want to do that, and that is still, one of the biggest installed Fedora desktop base. It probably dwarfs every other possible install of Fedora. Yeah. Yeah, so there's about 4 million of them, Fedora Linux desktops running all around the world. Those also do not show up in the statistics. Yeah, so they do the user space, but there's hardware support issues. So maybe. Other questions? Lead.
I'm probably going to find it unlikely that we're going to break kernel. I'm trying to maintain that kernel Fedora because
Yeah, right. So yeah. For the video, the comment is that Steve Gallagher is resistant to having products that have a separate kernel in them. That's kind of a level we want to keep at the base design the same. And Josh, who's the kernel maintainer, says that he will kill anybody who suggests otherwise. Oh no, just kill Steven. I see. Yeah, so again, it comes to the it's made of people thing. If you really need a separate kernel and you have the resources to maintain it, awesome. We would love to see that, but Debian has in their constitution a thing about how you can't declare anything that will just force out anybody else to do work, and I think we don't have that in our constitution, but it's a basic fact. We can't just sit here and declare this is going to be the way things are and then expect people to show up and do it because we said so. It really needs to have people who want to do something, and then we can help enable those people, but we can't really declare and hope anything will happen. Yeah? We had the SMOLT project years ago. Could that be revived as a Yeah, what happened to the SMOLT project we had before?
I gave up on it, nobody gave a shit. So.
Yeah, right.
Something that Andy McCollum did called Census, actually.
Yeah, yes, he is. I don't know if he's in this talk or somewhere else. Nathaniel McCollum is working on something called Census, and he actually 2 days ago said, let's talk about that some more. So that is kind of the next generation of SMOLT. I think he kind of got disheartened because at Flock he gave a talk about it, and there was a lot of resistance to having it to the amount of tracking that it kind of entailed. So I don't know if we can sell it better now, especially it really having data to drive our development and our process just really makes it so much easier. So if we can find a way to balance the privacy concerns and the need for that information, it would be great. Yeah.
SMOLT was both opt-in, but had another purpose.
Yeah. So,
Hardware profile.
right. So SMOLT was both opt-in and had the purpose of hardware profiling, and so it was not necessarily the right thing. So I think we'd probably go forward with this new Census thing if we could do that. And as I think I alluded to that in the slide, that I really want to start at least with a very minimal, very careful opt-out thing, and then maybe going to have people opt into Census, and then maybe it will become less scary over time, and we can get a broader base.
So you said that you want to improve speed take, but don't you think that the first thing to do to improve it would be to increase its visibility from the front page? Because if there's a tiny red speed spec, but it's hidden in a locked drawer with beware of the background written on it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, Kevin's comment is that improving the spins page, if the spins page itself can't be found, is not useful on itself, and I think that's true. I think there's always this balance between trying to promote something with the focus and trying to promote everything else we're doing at the same time. So finding that balance is a difficult thing to do, and I actually kind of agree that we buried it a little too much this release. So hopefully we can do better with that balance the next time around. Any other questions? I was asked. Oh, sorry.
What are the plans for ambassadors as far as increasing? We've got these new products and whatnot, and we've got a lot of good press, but really capitalizing on that and pushing it forward.
Yeah. So the question is, what are the plans for capitalizing on what we're doing with the Fedora Ambassadors, which is a very large section of the project that I think historically hasn't felt very connected to the engineering side of the project, which has kind of been a problem. So that's one of the things we are hoping to address with the Fedora Council, and there is a plan which once we get this new role filled, it's going to be the thing I'm going to dump on this person. It's here's your job one, please get this going. The idea for on sort of the engineering side of the project, we have Fedora FESCO, the Fedora Engineering Steering Committee. On the other side of the project, sort of the outreach side, we haven't had anything that's a high level kind of thing, except for going all the way up to the board, which felt too high level, which kind of left things disconnected. So marketing, I think the main thing, I think the ambassadors, which are an on-the-ground marketing organization, and then Fedora marketing, never talk to each other. The idea is to form an outreach steering committee that brings those things together, sort of underneath the council, but higher level of communication at that point. And so that hopefully, and there's a little bit of work on that, and FAMSCO, the Ambassador Steering Committee, has agreed that it's a good idea, but it's kind of waiting on work to be done there. But I have hope for that. Yeah.
Maybe I would like to hear some thoughts on how to make the package reviews faster and easier.
Thoughts on how to make the package reviews faster and easier. Yeah, so this is a hard problem, especially for new contributors with package reviews, where one of the basic problems we have in Fedora is that we have a hard shell outside and then soft chewy inside model for basically most of everything we do. And so getting into Fedora is the hardest thing to do, and getting your package in is the hardest thing to do. And then once your package is in, whatever. And once you're in, you basically get a lot of privileges and can also do whatever. So part of our model, for better or for worse, is to make it very painful so that if you want to get your package into Fedora, it's almost intentionally hard so that we can prove that you are committed to the pain that it takes to be a packager right up front. And if you don't survive through that, we don't want you around. So that's not necessarily the best model for it, but that's part of the reason it's so difficult.
Does that still apply by package number 83? Come on.
Yeah, right. Well, it's still hard sometimes to get your 83rd package reviewed. I don't know. If you have 83 packages, man, you're in for so much pain. I'm not even.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to do, and I don't know if there are any great plans for that. Langdon, were you making noise over there, or did I see you moving around? Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, we have been doing a little experimentation with kind of non-RPM, components, and try to make some of that maybe
Right.
easier, but
Let me.
it's really experimental. I
don't think that's the right solution. I
Yeah.
think it would make it easier for trusted packages to import packages. As I said on the mailing list, I think if you're trusted enough, I don't care if it's proven packager or sponsor or both that you need, or if you introduce a new category. But as soon as you have a certain level of trust, you should be able to import the packages without running them through review.
Right. So Kevin's comment is basically addressing the 83 packages concern. Once you're at a certain level of trust in the project, maybe you don't need it to go through the package review. I don't know. One of the things I think that's the long-term way of addressing this is with the Fedora Rings model, where we say that if your package is going into the core, we maybe need 3 people to review it. If your package is something at the edge, it's the dependency for something you want to get in and isn't meant to be used for something else, it needs less review. And one of the things that, looking bigger, this bundling is a big data problem. One of the things that, a lot of the problems we are having with the current model of developing software in the world is that everybody wants to vendorize their libraries, basically import them into their Git tree and then forget about it. And we have a lot of the pain in packaging is fighting that. And it is it's like, trying to stick our finger in the dam and hold back the world of software development. And we may be right, but it's right, but underwater is not going to help us at all.
To be clear, right, they don't actually want to vendorize them. They really
Yeah.
don't. Like, most
Yeah.
developers do not want to vendorize anything. It's that there's no good model to trust what you're getting. Right? So I don't want to carry around my own Ruby, but if I know I have this version of Ruby and my stuff will continue to work with my version of Ruby,
Yeah. Right.
carry it around.
So
It's not because
Langdon's comment is that Ruby sucks. Yeah. No, that basically developers don't really want to vendorize, but it's the only way they can trust that what they have works. And it is also the case that if you have a project that you do your own QA, you want to QA it with the libraries that you used, and then you don't necessarily know that the explosion of possible system libraries that it's going to work with. This is one of the things that I think Logstash has said. They don't want people to package their stuff because they don't trust that what people are going to do to get rid of their libraries that they know work and replace them with system stuff is going to be pain. So I think that, I don't know if we're going to come up with a solution for the software development world. Maybe we are, but I think that, it seems unlikely. So failing that, I think that we need to find a way to accept more bundling in the distribution. And traditionally, we've solved this problem for systems administrators by stopping it, and that has been, fairly successful up till now until it's causing a lot of pain. But if we can step back and look at other ways to solve the same problem, so if we basically treat it as we've got all this software here, we've got the source code to it all, we know it's all open source, and if we can identify if there's a CVE, if there's an exploit, we can identify all the parts of the code, the whole base, where that might happen, no matter what it is in, whether it was copied in there, whether it's using a system library, whether it's some modified form, whether it's a similar function that does the same thing. We can automatically identify those things and patch them automatically. or at least flag them for review automatically, maybe we can sort of move that pane to a different point and make it easier to get things in without having to. Basically, our model right now is we take all potential anticipated pain up front so that it'll be easier later, which you appreciate when there's a security problem, but most of the time when there's not a security problem, you grumble about it and everybody says Fedora's terrible. So.
There's also the problem that banding libraries waste disk space and also RAM because the different
Right.
they're also loaded in different places in RAM and it's also wastes disk space.
Yeah. So Kevin's comment is that bundling also wastes disk space in RAM, and I agree. And I think that that's one of the things that, again, at the core level, we don't want to have hundreds of copies of things at the core. But if you have things that are basically, I'm out of time. If you have things that are basically edge things where you're probably only going to be running one of these things at a time anyways, it doesn't matter where your copy came from. They're not running both at the same time anyways, or you're running them in two separate VMs and it's wasting memory anyways. I am out of time, so thank you all for your questions. I'm supposed to announce that in this room later, Dan Walsh's super privileged containers talk is here. So basically, this is the room to be at all day, I think, if you look at the schedule.